welcome the incredible Mr. Sheldon Snyder.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, long enough. Okay, let's see. I'll get it close. I guess this is one of those mics you've got to be 6 less inches away to talk into it. Which would be hard for me tonight, but anyway. I guess I'll have a prop I'll be carrying around all the time. I hope the line is long enough. I'll just be carrying it around. So, I'm happy to be here. I've just gone through a 33-day tour of Eastern United States and Europe. And it was an interesting thing because I hadn't been back to New York City since basically I left the East Coast about 25 years ago. So it was kind of interesting. Of course, I didn't really get to do much. All we had was, wherever we went, we only had like 1 day or an hour to do anything touristy. So you may say, well, they went to Europe and all that. Well, that's all we got. We got 1 whole day in Europe to ourselves out of 30 days. So if you were thinking I was doing anything wonderful, running around in Europe, you're wrong. All I was doing was working. I met some incredibly beautiful people during the course of the work. The people that are really, I didn't believe that there were many people in Europe or that my book was that popular. I was totally and completely overwhelmed by it. I meet people that were Swedish and Danish, and they had read the book. And once I even asked, my first time I did a lecture with my friend Peggy McConnell was the one who went with me. We were doing a lecture, so I decided, just because they told me to, they said, why don't you ask them? So I did, and I said, how many people have read the book? And 3/4 of the people in a room of 180 people put their hands up, and that really amazed me. I didn't realize that the book was doing so well, and the interest in Europe for setting up the advocate groups is just unbelievable. And I was overwhelmed quite a few times, almost cried because I was just so happy. I didn't understand how wonderful received the whole material is and how much what has been said. Evidently, Lord Michael has been doing a lot of channeling through various people, especially in England and in Denmark and in Sweden. That was basically confirming the stuff that I was talking about, which made me very excited because I had never talked to these people before. And it was interesting to hear their complete affirmation of my stuff. So it was fascinating. I enjoyed it immensely, although it was kind of tiring. Like in Sweden, I was doing 3 things in a day for about 4 or 5 days. So that was kind of hard. The hardest thing I did, I think, in England was doing a workshop 1 day, all day, and then finishing up the evening with a lecture all the way to midnight. But anyway, nothing like a full day from 9 in the morning till midnight. But that was just an idea of what I was doing. So I didn't really get a chance to do touristy stuff. I spent 10 minutes at Stonehenge. I had 30 minutes at Canterbury Cathedral. So I spent, I think it was 20 whole minutes at the Abbey in Glastonbury. So that's an idea of my tour of Europe. Most of it, was I said, was working, and the people, as I just said, were incredible. England's energy was, of all the places I went, I just cannot explain it all. When I finally left Devonshire, which was on the last day, they had a little meeting at a place that was in the middle of nowhere. But most of Devonshire places are in the middle of nowhere. I called it Hedge City. You would go down these roads that were maybe about as wide as the screen over here behind me, and you would be surrounded by these 6 to 10 foot tall hedges on both sides. It felt like you were in the world's longest maze. And in fact, I made a joke to the person who was driving us around. I said, how can people drive in these places? Especially if you run into a truck. And he told me, don't keep saying that, I don't want anyone to show up. So The hard part in England, of course, was I was glad somebody else was driving. Was to me at the beginning, it was they were driving on the wrong side of the road. And after about a week of running around on the English highways, I had totally become accustomed. So that when I landed after that in Sweden, I thought they were driving on the wrong side of the road. Because we had to spend our last night in Stockholm before we came back, because we found out with our trip we had to do the round-trip ticket. So we were going from New York to Stockholm, so we had to go back. So I wound up with an incredible return trip. I call it the one day from hell. It was ridiculous. It was 30 hours long. But when it was done, I was back here, and I really saw how much I really missed this place. I guess people don't really realize about America until you spend a month away from it. And Europe is an incredible place. It has these unbelievably old buildings. Like when I was in Amsterdam, for one whole night, because our plane got involved in a strike. KLM hasn't had a strike in 30 years. And I had the joy, the pilots decided to take a one-day strike to protest the change in pay policy. And guess what? They were supposed to do it on the Friday before I came. They picked the day we arrived. So I got to spend the night in Amsterdam, courtesy of KLM. So on the way out, the driver, since there was only 4 of us in the van, and he could speak very good English, he gave us a tour of Amsterdam. So that was my European tour of Amsterdam. And so he was explaining about these canals and these old buildings. The place is beautiful. I got to walk around about an hour before we had to go to bed, and it was fascinating. I walked across one bridge that was built in, what did it say, 1637. And I said, wow. There's this beautiful old stone bridge. It was really, I was amazed at seeing, it was like walking through, to me, from all my life, it was like walking through a giant museum. That's what a lot of it, especially when I went to Glastonbury. The whole town looks like it's a set for a medieval movie. It's incredible. I was sitting there in front of the Glastonbury Experience where the workshops and the lectures were held, and I was just looking out at a scene that probably people from the 16th century probably saw. And it was beautiful. Even though it was kind of old and dreary, it was still beautiful. And that's when I really realized how incredible this country is. Because you could see the differences and see why it was that people first came here, and why the new consciousness that we're going to get talking about in a few minutes is really that important to happen. But the beautiful thing about it was, in spite of these old facades around, like beautiful downtown Copenhagen is just incredible. It's a beautiful city. But the people are very much seekers, just as we are, very much New Age seekers of knowledge. And even though they had a language problem, because I couldn't speak Danish, but they could understand English, one of the things I found fascinating was we did a lot of stuff where the person who was dealing with us had to speak parts in Danish, and it was interesting to try to figure it out, what she was trying to say, because she would change certain things around in what we were doing so they would understand it better. So it was kind of nice. And then we did a couple of radio interviews where they translated a large part of it in Danish, or they do the beginning part. And also, it was nice seeing the differences between Danish and Swedish, but I'm not going to get into that. I could go on like this all night, but I'm not going to. I came here for another reason. So what I'm going to do is start the way I normally do, because they're already telling me to stop, so I'm going to get going. They said if I want to do tours, I should have a night of that and not just do that. They have things to do, so I will do that. So I'm going to start with a very quick prayer to set the energies, and then I'm going to get into the whole concept of consciousness, because there's a whole concept in here that of the way of defining life that they want me to get into. They're very anxious to. Matter of fact, they were so anxious to do this, I didn't get to bed. They knocked me out around 9 o'clock last night. I was trying to unpack, and I had to make a bunch of phone calls, and it was like after I made the last phone call, it was like they gave me their sedative. And when they give it to you, you go. So I had two questions. I said, could I brush my teeth and change into my pajamas? And they said, so I just went to bed, and I woke up, it was 1:30. Then I could change. Until then, because I guess they said they had to realign me because of the energies. And then they woke me up at 5:15 this morning to work. So, and I thought it was good they did that, because I probably wouldn't have gotten everything I got done today done. So I'm going to show you the work they got me up at 5:15 to do. So let me start off with a prayer and then get into information. So I'm going to ask the Supreme Creative Force to bring down all that incredible energy of love and light that they've been throwing at me, and receive it for the entire room now, and let our entire room and our entire planet be bathed in this wonderful energy. And may this energy be used to help all of us here understand the magnificence of the energies and the message and the realities of newness in our consciousness and in our growth and development that are coming and are now in process, so that we can successfully understand on all levels what is happening here. And may what I'm about to deliver be known and recognized on all the levels needed, so that everyone here can use it to help build this new wondrous galactic civilization. Amen. So let me begin my great game called Carry the Microphone Around. So what I'm going to do here is start off with the first process and explain it. I guess it's not working. Does it have to be made louder? Or do I have to do the half-inch mark now? Okay, I gotta do it like this? I'll play singer, okay. Do you have a different mic? Good.
That'll be $5, please.
Little mic. Okay, good. Now I've got one I can use. I was afraid I was going to play walk around all night with that. I thought that would make for a nice videotape. Wonder what's he doing tonight. Okay, now what I'm going to do is explain this. First I'm going to read the bullets, and I'm going to go to the board and do some stuff. I better get my watch out, or I'll be here all night explaining this stuff. Because when they were explaining it to me this morning, I said, wow, that would make a great, incredible long treatise for a book. So,
Sheldon, please read as much as you can to the mic.
I am. I'm going to do that right now. I remember from my old days when Miriam was doing this, and she always used to yell at me, "You're not reading the notes." So I said, okay, I will do that. Okay, I will do this. This process is being done to allow us, it's about exploring the ascension and transformation process. This process is being done to allow us to return to the full consciousness that is the birthright of all galactic humans. We are now in the process of recreating our 13 chakra system and establishing the means for a return to our 12-stranded RNA DNA. We are also now being prepared for a return to our legacy as a true planetary guardian and as an intermediary between spirit and matter. And then I'm going to read the second one, because both of these are together. And I want to get both of them out, and then we can explain the whole thing together. Then I'll have it all there. Okay, stay there. Good. Now, this process is being done to prepare us for integrating mutual planetary responsibilities with the cetaceans, and also to help us to understand the nature of life and the creation. We're now on the verge of merging our science with our spiritual knowledge to truly know about the nature of time and reality. Our transformation ascension is required for the successful completion of the sixth creation. Now I'm going to do this to kind of be a preparatory for what has to be known. So I'm going to start with I said green and then go to blue. So I'll go to blue. This is the only advantage of being left-handed. You can start at the far end and work your way to the end, and then step away and people can read it. So, what we are basically doing right now in our reality is, as I've been saying for, it seems like forever, we are in the process of raising our consciousness. By raising our consciousness, it simply means that we are in the process of integrating into a new reality. Now, the new reality that we're integrating into is one which, as I've said, combines spiritual and physical realities. But what we also have to realize is that it also involves responsibilities in this reality. So we have to see ourselves really working up toward creating a reality that has to do with an integration, and the second thing we have to understand, it has to do with the whole concept of new knowledge. And when I get to the next one, I'm going to be talking about the whole nature of life. I'm going to try to not make it sound like a science study, because other people don't like, oh well, the best I can do. So, first of all, we are integrating two levels of reality here, as I stated. Now we have to understand what the creation was about. The creation was about creating a great void in the sixth creation, and taking this great void and creating out of it a light, which was the basis of the void. The darkness covered the light, because light was in the beginning, because that was the pre-creation. And if you wanted to look at it this way, we can talk about our previous creations, and this I'll call the pre-creation. I guess I'll have to hold this now. And then we have basically the creation itself, which is a void for this one. And I'll just call it create here. And this is the void. And then out of the void came light, which is the creative light. Now this light was unpolarized, but what happened was the light developed into two types, polarized and unpolarized light, and the reason for that was the nature of the vortices. And I'm not going to get into the science of the spins and all that other stuff right now. What's important for us to understand is that is how it was created, because I'm going to be talking about two different types of light creating life. So I wanted to get into that right now, or else it'll be like a train leaving the station when you're talking, and all of a sudden you say, "It's gone," and I will be off on the train, and you'll be at the station, and I won't do anybody any good. So what I want to do is have you understand this light. Now the polarized light of the great light, which is a high vibrational light, and it's not like the light you see in your light bulb here. It's a very bright light of a very different type. It's of a very high frequency. And because of that, it's also interdimensional, and I'm not going to deal with all that interdimensional stuff right now. Because if I get into all of that stuff, which I would love to do, and in fact that's what I was doing them this morning, which why it took me so long to get it done. It took me 3 hours to get these bullets out. Normally I do an hour and a half. Because I started talking to them. Because I was getting excited by what I'm going to be telling you. And then I decided that why I'm getting excited is probably why you wouldn't get excited. So I asked them about that, and they said they're right, but they wanted me to understand it so I could explain it to you. But if you can imagine light pouring out across darkness, and then switching its energies to create dimensions, and then this darkness becoming dark again, but much with like a bulge around it. Oh well, I don't want to get in. I'm trying to avoid the mathematics. Basically, is what I'm trying to do, because I got into them and I saw that there were whole concepts of mathematics with this, because we have a thing which we call transverse calculus, which is what we work this on, which is a variation of calculus that the people, that scientists right now are beginning, especially topographers, are beginning to get into. But the key point of this, you might see it as the great void, and what I did is I drew it as an 8. And then the 8 twists and forms another dimension and forms another 8. But I'm not going to draw the 8s on top of one another, because not only am I a lousy drawer, I'll probably really confuse you even more. So just see these things as impinging on one another and forming voids as they switch up, which contain light, but light covered by the energy of the void. And each one of these twists leads into what's a flux point. Fluxes are basically what we would call boundary layers. So they exist around the dimensions, and they are basically regulating the energies between dimensions. When I was a kid, They went into a whole series of formulas of how to determine the nature of a dimensional flux and how much energy a part of a dimension can contain at any one time and how fast the conversion from one dimension is to another. So they have a very incredibly complete science on this whole project of how it came to be, and they were trying to explain it to me, and I'm going to try to explain it without getting involved in science. There was a physicist I knew when I was in Los Angeles, when I was doing my television stuff, and he basically said the following to me. He said, if you can't explain science without mathematics, it's not worth explaining. And then he turned around and he said, but for the layman, if you can explain the science without giving the math for it and have them know it as much as the scientists, then you've accomplished something. So the key point that I'm going to try to do is do that. I may do a very poor example of it, but I'm going to try. I figure a successful try is worth not trying at all. Now, what I'm going to do with the rest of this next part is we're going to get into this thing I was just talking about. And we're going to talk about how this relates to consciousness. Because this can get very complicated, but if you keep it simple, it won't. So I'm going to read these, since you're required to read the bullets again. The true nature of full consciousness. Consciousness was developed by the spiritual hierarchies of this creation to allow them to complete this sixth creation according to the Creator's divine plan. Out of consciousness came the ability to establish the physical creation in its reality. Consciousness is just the ability to recognize and to know spiritual and physical realities that are part of these creations. Now, after life was created, and basically how life was created was these vortex points went around the light that was being polarized by the shifting in the boundary layers, creating the different dimensions of creation, and formed what I call magnetic vortices, which spun in both positive and anti-directions. These then created boundaries around, or what are called in physics Meissner fields, weak magnetic fields around this light, and defined it. As it was defined, it became more dense because it became a patch of light that was impinging upon itself. And this created eventually the third dimensional physical reality. And I'm not going to get into how that was created, except to say that it was part of the vortex energies and vortex fields. Anything above that, we'll start getting into physics, and I don't want to do that right now. This is not supposed to be a physics demonstration. It's supposed to be about metaphysics. The key point is, as this occurred, it also created two different realities. Because not only were there these left and right-handed spins, but there were spins that were curlicues. And these curlicue spins were gravity, and they created a different life form, which we call planets and cosmic dust and everything else that exists out there. Now, consciousness was something that was created to regulate the nature of the spin. It basically works like this. I hope I'm not getting too complicated here, because this is my problem that I was worried about tonight. So what happens is you have your little spin, and then you have your little spin, and then you had your spins that were like that, and then the other ones that were the other way. And this is your gravity, creating a different containment, because this created a stronger field. Basically, gravity is the strongest field per area that you can have. When you use magnetism and you bend magnetism, which is basically what you do in magnetics to make it stronger, you will start creating a field akin to gravity, but not quite the same. But I'm not going to get into that because gravity also deals with time-spatial displacement. And what all that means is that you're simply bending the fabric of space-time, and that's how gravity creates itself. So now I'll be getting into Einstein. I don't want to do that. No science. So, just say that, well, I'm trying not to turn this into a physics thing. Then the next thing I'll start doing like I did this morning, I'll start running the math through my head, and then you really get lost. I said I wasn't going to do that. Now, What happens with all of this is that then you have two forms of life being created. One that seems more inanimate than the other. The animate life form is the one that's created by the magnetism and the light together. The other form creates an entirely different life form. So you have two aspects of reality in the physical universe. These are the two forms of life. So one they decided we were going to call magnetic, and the other form we were going to call gravitic. Now, gravitic.
Sheldon, turn it
Yeah. What? Okay, turn it in. Now, gravitic life form is a life form that is based upon an entirely different reality. Since it must be regulated at a much more specific level than magnetic because it's a much stronger field energy, even though it may seem very weak, gravitic energy is very powerful. Magnetic energy is powerful in a different way. Both are interdimensional in their realities. Now, once again, keeping it simple, I'm not going to go into the differences between what a gravitic field is and what a magnetic field is. But what I'm going to do is just deal with the polarities. When you deal with that, you begin seeing that there are two aspects, and both of these energies relate back to the original creation. So you have a source, and then you have two forms. One is, I'll just call it M, and the other one I'll just call it G. And each one of these forms needs a regulator. Now the way they regulate is through the nature of consciousness. You might look at consciousness in its simplest form as being no more than a way to regulate magnetic or gravitic life forms. As you increase the ability to regulate, you increase the level of consciousness. By integrating both the physical and spiritual interdimensional natures of the regulation, you increase your consciousness. I just wanted to get that down straight, simple, without any mathematics involved. Now, when you do that... Okay, we'll do it again. Okay, now, as I said, I'll try to do it a little different way. Maybe that will help people understand. Didn't hear the words? Okay, there are two forms. One is magnetic, one is gravitic. There's a regulator. The regulator is consciousness. Consciousness is simply the ability to regulate the changing natures of magnetic and gravitic. As you integrate that higher up into different levels of dimensions, you develop a more fuller consciousness. Full consciousness is the ability to regulate this change on all levels. The highest level of full consciousness is at the source, since it can regulate all the layers according to the divine plan of the creation. There are basically 10 creations. We're in the 6th. That's what they told me last summer. And I said, wow, we made it all the way to 6, and I didn't even know about it. What they simply said was, this is why I want to get into the whole concept of the pre-creation. All that comes before creation sets the rules for the next. So in the first 5 creations, it was all about the nature of what light was, which is this nature of life. So life was explored in all its various ways, as in a very positive way. The first creation, which this is the antipodal point of, was about the nature of how light established creation. This one is about how out of darkness light comes to make a greater creation. And this is the start then of explaining and creating and completing the concept of the creation by bringing all the energies back to source by the end of the 10th one in perfect alignment to the divine plan, because the consciousness was to make all aspects of reality, of infinity, knowledgeable of all things, of which we are a part. And in fact, this is the stuff that you hear about at the beginning of the various Vedic literatures, the whole concept of the creations of various indigenous people, etc. This is something that you hear continually about. What I'm trying to do is show you that there's a scientific basis for it. As a matter of fact, this is stuff that right now really advanced particle physics and really advanced concepts of quantum are talking about. There's even using this to try to get rid of quantum and relativistic theory and create a new reality.
What is a gravitic life form? What is a magnetic life form? Give us an example, Sheldon.
Example? I already did give an example. Okay. Magnetic is like us. Okay? Animals, plant kingdom. Gravitic is planets, stars, galaxies. Okay?
Is that the same thing that the minds talk about, movement and danger?
That's a part of it, yeah. What they were talking about, the movement is a regulation, the moving down of the energies. And then the way it is brought through is the nature of the consciousness. Now we have to understand, this is what I want to get into later today, is how magnetic and gravitic relate to one another. Because what happens is we are a regulator. Since we represent the full conscious magnetic for this dimension, we're one of many varieties of this. We don't have an exclusive monopoly on it, but we're one of them. What we do as a sentient being is this regulation. When we do this regulation successfully, the gravitic, because it is a way of restoring magnetism, it then can make us feel much more complete. So what happens is you get a very incredible thing going here that allows one aspect to work with another. And the result of that is you get a very wonderful synthesis occurring. And this is basically why the creation, at the beginning when I was wondering about, well, why, if there are these wonderful life forms called stars and planets, why did they need life on them? The reason why they needed life on them was that the magnetic, as it was allowed to move toward higher abilities to regulate, became fully conscious or a degree of conscious, and then was able to regulate. That's why we can bring our love energy and affect the earth. And why the earth, in return, as it balances itself, can make our whole civilization stronger. That's why we are earth beings, because we have regulated our magnetism, our magnetics, to this planet. So as the planet brings up its energies to create a new regulation, we are required to do likewise. It's a symbiotic relationship. If X happens, Y has to happen. If Y doesn't happen, and it's forces Z, that means that Y then is in difficulty. Because then a new set of limits is set on the equation, which changes the whole ballgame around. So what we have to do is understand that. That's what consciousness, purely consciousness, represents. So as we change our regulative abilities, we change our reality. As we change our reality, we change the whole concept of how we relate to everything around us. We become more able to do our job, basically. So let me move on a little bit more. I think eventually when I get this whole series finished, I'll have another book to write here. Because this is very complicated, and if I really wanted to do this, I'd get an artist and spend about 2 or 3 days with them and try to get this done properly. Because the next part of this gets even more complicated. The true nature of full consciousness. Full consciousness in its most basic state is simply the ability to recognize and to know how to integrate both the nature and reality of the spiritual and physical creations. Now, that's just another way of saying what I just basically said, only in a little different way. If you know and understand the nature of what an integration is, it's an entirely different process. When you talk to people who do integration theory, as far as psychology, etc. goes, they talk about bringing in other things or parts of you. What we're talking about here is that all these parts exist, and all you have to realize and understand is how they operate. And as you do that, which is what consciousness is about, when you have the ability to recognize and know this, that it's there, it happens. That's one of the marvelous things about this. It's like a magical gate. And it's sitting there all the time, and you're going nuts, try to raise it. And when you realize the only way to raise the gate is to sit back and yell to the gate in your mind, open, and it goes up. So we've been struggling for a long, long time trying to open the gate, thinking we had to push it, or pull it out of the way, or do something, like take a crowbar, maybe try to get the different parts of it apart, because it refuses to move. And we can't figure out why it won't move. And the only we have to do is just sit back and say, open, and up it goes. This, unfortunately, is the way most of us have been living our lives. In its highest form, full consciousness is the basis for angelic creation and determines how the divine plan is to be administered. As such, it was the gift of the angels to us so that we could perform the special functions given to us by the divine plan of the sixth creation. So what we're basically saying here, if you'll just look at it, is, as we said, the regulation of these different energy forms, these different states is what they would probably call it in science. We were trying to get specific here. As we alter our states of consciousness, or in this case alter our dimensional states to really be accurate mathematically, you would have to be altering states. As you alter states, you change the regulation, which is basically the limits of these different fields around you. As these fields shift, they then allow you to be more accurate in how you can relate to other things. It's almost if you had a light and you could only shine it for a certain distance, and then you can only recognize as far as you have the light. But if you learned how you could get a more powerful battery or a more powerful bulb, let's say, for the light, you would then bring the energy out farther, and then you would understand what was around you, and then you could relate to it better. That's basically what consciousness is. It's the regulator. It says you can go as far as you want, provided that you truly understand what it is that you're doing. That's why it was a gift given by the angelics, because that's how they administer this particular creation. So that's their secret. So now you know their secret. That's why people have amazing abilities to manifest when they learn to just let go through what they're doing and allow it to happen. And I just saw that happen to me this afternoon. I'll give you an example of it. I just told the universe, I don't know how I'm going to figure out how I'm going to get around in Santa Fe. I'll just let whatever happens happen. So then a lady called me up and told me that a friend of hers had told me that I could use her brand new Ford Explorer for the weekend. So there, solved. That's all you do. You manifest. It'll work. You just put it out there. So that's basically how it operates, because what this creation is about is understanding how light creates and manifests itself out of darkness, basically to us which would seem like nothingness. So let me move on to that and give you a definition of life. Now I'm going to be at a conference on the first weekend in July, actually the weekend of July 8th, which is going to talk about the whole concepts of life. And what they've been discovering is a man named David Hudson discovered out of operating on trying to create a superconductor about the nature of what life is about. And he's discovered some amazing things. So I got it crooked. I can't have life be crooked. It's got to be straight. Got to lead a straight life here. Okay, we'll get it over a little more. There we go. I think I got it relatively straight. Now, life developed out of the very nature of the physical creation. Its nature and purpose was to enable physical creation to exist. Life was from the spiritual light of creation, and it was defined by the development of special light vortices that formed magnetism and gravity. The nature of these special light vortices formed two types of life, one created due to unbounded magnetics and one formed by highly boundaried magnetics, which is gravity. And I'm not going to get into all of that stuff because they keep wanting, there's a group of people that I deal with, they keep wanting me to get into physics, and wanted me to really sit down one day and do the thing that I lost, that I'm really kind of upset about. My dad, when I was at college one year, got into my desk and ripped up all the science stuff that I got when I was 8 or 9. It got me very upset. But he did those things like that my whole life. So he was my great test. So I wish I had that, because I would love to have been able to have shown that to a scientist one of these days. It was the basis of how to create the limits in this transverse calculus. I really wanted to show that. I got a little bit of it in one of my science notebooks when I was developing my alternate energy stuff. But anyway, so let's move on to the next step of what life is about, and then get an idea of what this is about.
You can recapture that in a variety of ways.
What?
You can recapture that information in a variety of ways.
Well, I tried a variety of ways, and there's a block on it until the right time.
Will we get a copy of those cards?
Yeah, they were for $1 up front, and he came in. If there's any left. Now, they keep wanting to have life be crooked here. So, now the first ones mentioned are what we call the viral plant and animal kingdoms. They work on magnetics. As a matter of fact, one of the processes that people are developing with disease is they're noticing how magnetics are weakened and repolarized when viruses come around in cellular structures. People have done magnetic tests of what happens with viruses, and they've seen these vortice points. A lot of scientists that are doing alternate health research right now are discovering the same thing happening. So the second ones are what we call, as I just said, planets, stars, galaxies, and other cosmic materials. They are gravity, which is a different special form of magnetism. It's boundaried. It's in a whole different reality. It's a special case. Now, life must be seen as a great and a high vibrational light with special properties that was created to fill the void of this physical creation. Life is also the means whereby consciousness can be determined and tested. Now, let me explain what that's all about. Now, when you have light, and the light now gets surrounded by these special vortices, and it creates what I call the boundary of reality around us. Basically, that's what it is. And as we regulate this magnetics, which we call consciousness, we discover how it's related to source. Now, the angelics are a higher, more integrated energy. They attach themselves because they understand the nature of magnetics to our magnetics and regulate it. That's what they call guiding us. That's why every so often if you do something, you'll feel something in a certain part of your body or a certain part of your reality. So now, as they're playing with our boundary layer of reality, which is our consciousness, which is our magnetics, that's why the way people get sick is they get their magnetic and electrical fields all screwed up. The reason why they do that is they develop a consciousness of negativity. They start not regulating in order to integrate, they regulate in order to disintegrate. And that causes disease. As a matter of fact, I think it's the most appropriate name in English, disease. That's what it is, it's disease. And then the way a healer will cure you, and he or she is not really curing you, what they're simply doing is resetting the energies to allow you to reintegrate properly. And when you integrate again properly, you get well. Or else you will go through a crisis, because everything is stored in the magnetics. Your whole memory pattern, your brain, etc., is no more than a giant light computer. And the light computer is balanced, as the light computers are today, it's balanced by changing and the evolving magnetic fields. So the switching of the magnetic fields is how light stores and gets rid of energies. This is how light computers operate. And they can do switching very, very incredibly complicated because you don't need the circuitry you do in a standard chip. But what has been happening is almost a miracle that has prevented this stuff from getting out on a large-scale basis, is that the degree that we are learning to switch the light on and off to hold memory patterns is almost at the same speed now that the newer chips are learning how to do their switching. So guess what? The silicon stuff is still in charge of our computers. Now, but we're reaching a limit. If we were allowed in our civilization to maintain ourselves for another decade, it's believed by a lot of major computer engineers who know about the light stuff, which is mainly being researched at two places. It's being researched right now at the Bell Laboratories in New Jersey, and the other place is right up the road here in Stanford. So what they are discovering is how incredibly this energy switching is to what people are discovering. John Eccles at the University of Buffalo, where I got my original degree from, undergraduate, is now doing incredible things about what he calls the holographic computer of the mind. And his work, along with two very incredible Chinese-American scientists in New Jersey, are proving one another. One is using each other's models to explain the other. So Eccles is using holographic and light computation theory to explain memory patterns, and the memory patterns that he's picking up, how that operates, is then helping people with the light computers understand better how to do storage and memory release at the same time. So the result is that one is helping the other. And they're determining that life basically is this huge light computer, and the magnetics determine the switching. So we hold all our memory patterns in our magnetics. We hold all our past lives, everything. This acts as our boundary regulator. As we learn more and more how to understand this as a light energy, we develop a greater level of consciousness. And I'm just going to keep that without getting it. You could do very easy algebraic equations on this right now and get into the math real quick, but I'm not going to do that because a lot of people see math and think, oh no. So I decided I would make an agreement with them that we wouldn't do that tonight no matter what. So I've told them that when they talk to me about this tonight, we're going to do, and nothing about the other stuff. Now let me talk about the bottom part. Life is also the means whereby consciousness can be determined and tested. And when I put that one down, I got into a 10-minute argument with them on that one. And they explained it to me. Now, you have a regulator. It's called your magnetics. The magnetics, in turn, create the electrical system of the body. The nature of the magnetics determines the nature of the electrical signal. So, how do you determine your consciousness? You determine your consciousness through the relationship between the electrical system and the magnetic system. And then how do you determine how your consciousness is raised or lowered? By testing it. And I said, well, how do you do that? That sounds wonderful. How do you test? So they said the way that you test is by working an energy level. This has to do with the spiritual guides. Your spiritual guides are continually monitoring your fields. So when you work your fields in a certain way where you're conscious, in other words, you've determined your consciousness at a certain level in a certain part of your body, you've probably done what they call chakra clearing. And this is basically what it is. You move to a certain area. You determine the level of energy in that pattern. What's going on? You clear it. As you clear it, you ask for, is it being cleared? The other part, which is the angelic, will come back with an answer. And that's why you will feel a change in energy. Because then they will regulate, they will test the change in the energies. So that's why they had me put that in, because I said that didn't sound right. So life is therefore the means whereby consciousness can be determined and tested. Life was created in this creation to show how darkness could come out of light and then could be made greater, and the darkness changed. And that's what's happening with this. Now, let me move into the relationship to the soul. And I'll read some more of the bullets. Life and its relationship to the soul. Life was created out of the special light of creation and was brought down into the lower physical realms as a soul. Now here we're going to talk about a soul from source down to physical, and then life in terms of a lifetime being that reality that is being created in the physical that relates to the infinite. Because the creation is, to any finite body, infinite, even planets age. Stars go through life as a birth, as a middle and old age, and then they nova and become something in their old age. They become a proton star or whatever. So they go through their aging process. They are not alone in this. But what makes them different is because they're a bounded life form. Their They don't have any ability to change in the physical into anything else that ages. It has a beginning and an ending. Because as the boundary layers increase, they cause changes that are inevitable. What our job is to regulate how that changing occurs. And once we realize that, we then realize the importance of what we have. Now, they also have a soul. This planet has a soul just as we do. It goes up to the source just as ours. It's regulated the same way. The difference is its lifetime is a lot longer. It's billions of years, where ours are at the most thousands. That does not mean that when a planet explodes because it's in a system that nobody, it doesn't mean it stopped existing. It's just transferred its reality so that it can come back again as another reality in another part of the galaxy or even in another galaxy. This process of migration of energies happens just as it does with life. They reincarnate just as we do. The Earth has a former incarnation, has a different system. It also has a history in its own reality of different lifetimes. One of the things that we will discover as we learn more and more about the energies of this planet is its own history. Not just the physical history as though we were looking at ourselves in a lifetime, but the spiritual energies. This is a thing that a lot of people, when I first was talking, I said, a lot of people are going to have a hard time with this one. And I'm hoping that you're not. So, just understand that this planet is alive. It's going through the same cycle that we are right now, because we're in a limited consciousness cycle. We're just like a planet. We're boundaried. When you go into a certain layer of magnetics, you create a recreation of what goes in a planet or a star system. You go through an aging process. And then the externals can act upon you in almost the same way. They can cause aging, death, etc. Now, the soul represents that which animates life and gives every human a special means to understand the true nature of creation. We have an energy from source, which is tied into the original polar light that created everything out of the great void. Because remember, there was the previous light, which was the past creation, the pre-creation. Out of it came the great void that created this creation, and out of that void, passing through it as part of the process of creation, was the light of the pre-creation. And that created the light that will make the void disappear into a greaterness than it is at present. So, this energy of the soul represents the eternal. And this is what they try to explain in different Bibles and literature from the ancient Brahmins, etc., the Vedic literature, the literature of ancient Egypt, etc. They're trying their own way to have people understand this whole thing. So let me try to do a little quick drawing here so you can understand it better. First, let me erase this so I have some room to draw on. Just going to do a little bit of this. And this time, to make it stand out, I'll use the black. Now, we have, as I said, the creation, which I'll simply put as CR. And then down here, I'll just put as a point here. This is the energy coming down. And this is our solar energy, and I'll call it solar here. And this is energy that relates to the two types, the magnetic and the gravitic. Now, let's get into consciousness and what life is and the regulation of it. As I said, the solar comes from the creation. It represents the original light. When this solar energy was brought into the boundary layer, it became the different forms of life, depending on the nature of how the vortices were brought in and created. And then they created the two different life forms. These life forms have the ability to transcend from one lifetime to another. And this is basically what we're talking about. Now, as you move your energies around, which means your magnetics, in the case of a magnetic one, your gravity field, your gravitic field, if you are the other form of life, then you regulate your consciousness. Now this is, as I said, with the gravitic, because it is such a boundary layer, it requires on its person the other form of life, because it has the ability to regulate this energy shift. This can lengthen the lifetime of a planet or a star system. It can create new energies to allow this star system to ascend properly. Now, when the planet is ascending as it is right now, it is doing it in spite of what is going on with us, and also because of what's going on with us. It's doing it in spite of us because we've taken a long time to do this. It's taken us millennium. Of course, to a planet, millennium is to us like an hour of a day. But what we have to realize is that if you're as impatient as a planetary life form can sometimes get, the fact that it took an hour for this to happen when you thought it could happen in 10 minutes kind of gets you upset. So the planet every so often has developed an energy pattern where it's kind of tried to express to us it doesn't like the fact we're taking so long to do this stuff. So finally it got permission to do what it wanted to do, and of course it felt like it took a whole week and a half. And it's like a little kid being told he can't do something until next week. To them it's like sometime next century. And so what the planet did was got permission to ascend. But when it got that permission, it meant that we had to do the same thing. Now, since the planet got a little impatient and wanted to get it done fast, it's put us on the fast track. So the result is that to stay here, we've kind of had to start running when we wanted to really do no more than a slow jog at the most. And that's what we're all in the process of doing right now. First thing that has to happen is our magnetics have to be switched up. That means our subtle fields and subtle bodies have to be made more accountable for full consciousness. That's what we're in the process of happening right now. As each aspect of our magnetics are switched on, it means that we have to, the physical part, which is light, we have to look at ourselves not as just bone and skin and all that other stuff. In between, we're light. But we're concentrated light. Or at least we've made ourselves appear that we're concentrated light. And like I said, we've convinced ourselves beyond belief, so even if we try to change it, we can't do it right now. If we were all trying to say, let's walk through that wall, I bet 99.9% of us would fall down or have a headache from banging into the wall. As I said, consciousness is based upon truly convincing yourself to let go of something and letting it happen. It's just like the fence analogy that I just did at the beginning. So,
Do you direct what you want to happen?
you direct it by not directing. This is an art. That's what Zen was trying to do in Japan. And basically what it got that concept from was how Buddha discovered what enlightenment was. Buddha discovered that enlightenment was learning not to get in the way. So, and this for us is very difficult, because we've spent our whole life from being a little kid learning that the only way to operate was to get in the way. So, if you spent your whole life being told that you could only walk backwards, and suddenly you're told that life is really meant to walk forwards, you're going to have a big argument with that person who tells you that walking forward isn't walking backwards. Because to you, walking backwards is where it's at. So this creates the difficulty. Now this is why, to full conscious beings, what we do is amazing. That we're still around here in one piece. Because basically we've been working on getting in each other's ways, or working on energies that get in each other's ways since we got into limited consciousness. Which is fun for a full conscious being if he wants to play, because it's the best game in town. I mean, you got all these people creating mazes for themselves every day. So if you want to make the maze a little more dangerous, you can go right ahead and do that. And the best thing about it all that they just love down here is that we create all these mazes for ourselves, and we believe that walking around in mazes is the basis of what free will is all about. So if they tell us we can't walk in our mazes anymore, we get very upset. Because we don't understand what it's about. In full consciousness, you learn that you create by getting out of the way and integrating what's around you. So you just get out of the way and let everything happen. This is what galactic time is all about. This is why a lot of people have a lot of trouble with it. What you have to learn is there's an energy in the day, which is the flow. And then you have to learn to get out of the way of the flow. To regulate how to get out of the way of the flow, you regulate it by seeing who you are, your consciousness, and then seeing how that consciousness relates to what's going on around you, which is the thing I was just explaining to you. So when you do that, you're then in sync. And when you get in sync with the energy of creation, you create. Now the hardest part for us, even myself, I am no giant slacker in this as well. I do the same thing. I've been getting in my way for so long. And then every so often I will let one little thing go. It's like a crack of light, and then bang, something manifests, and I'm totally amazed. How did that happen? I actually let something get away. And that's unfortunately what we all do. And we've been doing this since childhood, and so we create a pattern. And when we create a pattern, it's the energy. We can either get rid of the pattern, or we can just learn how to get out of the way of it, and then it'll get rid of itself. So there's a number of ways to integrate it. But the important point is to learn, get out of the way, and then integrate the energy as it flows by you. And then people will say, well, what's this integration stuff? So, integration is allowing the flow around you to happen. It's kind of like if you were to see a magnetic field. Well, anyway, I'll do a little bit of this. And then I'm going to finish up real quickly. I was afraid that this whole thing I'm doing was going to take forever. Because when I saw this thing this morning, this is going to be a long lecture. Okay, I'm just going to draw a few lines. Not a great deal. Now, this is our field. And remember now, I'll point to it. Okay, they said put an arrow there. I love arrows anyway. I once used to spend 10 minutes when I was doing my own drawings figuring out how to properly draw arrows, because I was neurotic about arrows. They had to be just right. And then I found this template where I could make arrows, and I was in heaven. I still have it in my desk. But anyway, that's my little idiosyncrasies. I'm sure you have yours. So, now, what happens is, when something comes by in a magnetic field, it will attract. The other magnetic field which it has, it will bend into it, and then the bending in puts the field across it, and if the bend is proper, it's attracted to it. It has to be an opposite bend, because the same bend will throw the angle out that the momentum will throw it away. That's why similar fields oppose one another and opposite fields attract. But anyway, now you know the science behind it. So, when you create this for yourself, you're creating a magnetic field of consciousness. When something happens, if you learn to bend your field around it so that it doesn't oppose it, like an opposite field, but you attract it and then just allow it to come around yourself. It's like if you're going positive and negative in fields according to the way that field is moving around you. And that's called integrating the field. It's regulating so that it allows it to come by without a great deal of interaction, where you're trying to control it. Control is a magic word here. We all try to do that, even myself. I will not exclude myself from that one. I'm probably noted for that. So, the purpose of the soul is to maintain the link to the spiritual nature of creation and to also establish the ways that allows us to complete our unique aspect of the divine plan. Now, how our magnetics are set up, each and every one of us has been given a unique set. Because of this fact that we've been given a unique set, we then have a very special role to play, because we can then integrate differently from everybody else. And how we integrate helps us to bring out the greater increase in consciousness for everybody. Because if you would look at this, you would see a bunch of fields, you would see things passing through it, this light energy of creation. Ideas are basically light energy. with a very weak magnetic around it, then how we attract it, everybody will attract this idea in a unique way, because each of us has a slightly different set of frequencies. These frequencies and how the vortices on these frequencies are formed creates who we are. That's our life energy. So then we take this life energy and we go to the next level. And then we learn how to increase it and how to decrease it, how to change the magnetic interdimensional fields, etc. And as we do this, we develop a concept of consciousness and we see how we are related one to the other. I hope I'm not losing a lot of people here today, but I wanted to explain this because they told me it was very important, because a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about up to now, a lot of people have probably been wondering what's going on with it, and we're only halfway through this thing.
Sheldon?
Yeah, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to shorten a lot of this stuff here, because most of you have all the slides, and because there's a lot of stuff left to go here, and the lecture I've got to do next month is based on all of this stuff, and I knew this was going to be a long lecture. I was driving over on the way and we were talking, and that's what happens. Another thing that always happens to me, I found out how I go through time real fast is when you totally don't look at the road anymore. I don't want you to start doing this now, but this works for me. When you don't look at the road anymore and you start talking to them, bang, you're 6 exits up. That's what happened to me today. I left at 10 after 6, I did the thing. So I got on the road again at 6:30 in Half Moon Bay. At 6:50 I was already here. But that's how fast you can go when you do that. So this is the whole process then. I'm just going to talk here about, I'm not going to get into these slides. I'm just going to go real fast through the rest of this now, because I wanted to get us into a proper time for a break, because I feel that real important right now for us to have a break. But I want to do 1 or 2 more things. I'm determined to do that.
Are you getting in the way again?
Yes, I'm getting in the way again. So, we have just described that life was the means chosen in this 6th creation to fulfill the divine plan and to establish a way to take light out of the void and make the greater light of this creation. So that's the key point out of that part. Now I'm going to get into the concept of the soul, and then I want to go real quick into a break after the next section. I'm just going to show one of these slides, then I'm going to jump over to another slide, because I knew this was a long lecture and I didn't realize it was this long. I think I could go another hour with this. So, now the soul is linked to the great source, as I just said, and is guarded by a special aspect of spiritual creation, the spiritual hierarchies. I just explained to you how they operate. So, as I said, the spiritual hierarchy has the great responsibilities, and we already talked about that. Each lifetime for every soul is designed to allow a different component of a soul's unique part in the divine plan to be fulfilled. We might look at each lifetime as being a certain set of the divine soul's frequencies that we are given to achieve a purpose. The purpose is to discover the nature of the regulation that we have to do so we can integrate properly and then move our consciousness up. And as we do this, we learn more about who and what we are. And that's basically what that's all about. And now we can move on. As I said, I'm going to speed it up, because I think we've already covered the basics of what we're talking about here with what we've already done. Every lifetime, as I just said, has a specific purpose. Creation is continued by the interaction between life and the spiritual hierarchy. Creation exists across an infinite timeline, which is not sequential. As it moves across this non-sequential timeline, it interacts with each aspect of ourself, which is connected in turn to the creative source itself. Therefore, the regulation between our life energies, which it says here, and the angelic creates what life is all about. That's the parameters of this creation. That's the energy interaction. That's our boundary. It's all the things you always work about in equations. That's your limits. Now, as you do this, you discover, like I said, this goes on and on because they're only on 12 and it's all the way up to 18. Every part of the spiritual hierarchy has a distinct role to play in guiding the successful completion of this creation. So that's why you have guardians. Planets have guardians, as we're going to get into in the next section. So I'm going to go ahead and get that section over with. I'm going to speed up through this so we can have a time for questions. Because I really see from the energies I'm picking up that I need a large question time here so people can ask questions. Because lecturing at people doesn't work with this stuff because you really have to understand it. And the only way you understand it is by asking a question. There's no such thing in this field as a dumb question. Every question has an importance. So every part of the spiritual hierarchy has a distinct role to play in guiding the successful completion of this creation. That's why you have guardians and guides. That's why even us can channel Lord Michael, because this is the key to how creation happens. Angels perform the function of being the guides for all forms of life in the sixth creation. Earth spirits, devas and presences, which are the next level up from Devic, are a special type of angel that acts as the guides for our planet's body and also its connection to its own role in the creation. We have to look at the angelic presences and the Devic energies of the different Devic kingdoms as being the guidance points. Just as we have angelics, so they do, and that's what their angelics are. So they, each aspect of life, as well as the great life itself, the earth, has its own energies, and we are interacting with that because that is largely gravitic with some magnetics thrown in. That's the Devic. The presences are the planet itself, and that's entirely magnetic. So we move on. I'm doing this real fast because I'm expecting some nice questions because I know you're incredible people and you'll come up with them. Now, all these various parts of creation, magnetic and gravitic life, are given a special set of guardians I just explained to determine their right relationship. All guardians have this special connection to Source and the divine plan. We have to remember to honor our guides and to use this same reverence in performing our guardianship for planet Earth. In the gravitic life, there is the angelic presence and the devas, and there's also us. Because we are, as the potential to be a full conscious being, when we graduate into full consciousness, we become part of this guardian status, this regulation of this gravitic energy that makes possible the Earth to live and create its energy. We can actually increase the timeline of the aging period of this planet and the star system by just being who we are capable of being. That's the amazing thing about what we have. That's why we're so important to what this planet is doing and to what everything that goes on in the physical universe is about. And that leads us to why we have great responsibilities here. So, first of all, this is about the New Earth grids. We are here to recreate the special relationship between Earth humans and angels. That's just the part we've been explaining right now. It's just a recap real quickly. The new grids are a special responsibility for us because they will require that we make a serious effort to regulate them and to help maintain the planet at optimum health. That's what I've been trying to explain very quickly. To do so will permit the Earth to easily support its quite incredible biosphere and allow us to achieve our mutual destiny. Because as we've been explaining in all our other lectures, we have a very special cosmic destiny. And that's what we're in the process of creating. Now, this is about next part. With the Earth in full consciousness and our society reformed to its responsibility, we will indeed become the beacon of galactic light. Now, the thing you have to remember about, people say, well, why is Earth so special? The reason why Earth is so special is because of two things. One, the special set of gravitic patterns that were established for our planet made it a planet that was able to house all forms of life. Now, what makes it especially important is that we also have an interdimensional vortex point and special guides among this planet that allows it to achieve what just about no other planet in this star system can achieve. And that is the ability to actually act as a diviner between the magnetic and the gravitic life forms. This planet has the ability to be an incredible translator, an unbelievable unit that can transfer and change energies around. Now, because of this, we have a great responsibility, and we should learn about this. That's why I'm doing all this little stuff here, and we should not waver at all in realizing the nature of this responsibility. So I'm going to go through the next part real fast, and then we can take a break. Now, this is just a basic overview of our civilization as a galactic human civilization, so you have an idea of what it's about. Our civilization will decide on how its social structure will be established, and the thing that I get, which this is just my idea, it's nobody else's. Anybody could be just as right as anybody else's. But I feel that what we're going to have, based on what they've been telling me, is a combination of a clan structure similar to the Lyran Siren, and it'll be superimposed on a very loosened extended family concept similar to what they have in Andromeda and Pegasus. Our governing council will reflect our special role in the galaxy and creation. Because of what we have as a reality, this will be reflected in our governing council. We will probably serve as a way station between the civilizations of other galaxies, dimensions, and the Galactic Federation because of this special ability that we have. I'm just going to go through this part real fast, and then the summary. As our reputation grows, we will become a trading center for this galaxy and will probably replace the star systems of Andromeda as a center for spiritual conferences. The regional council for our sector is in Andromeda, in the Delta Star. My throat's starting to go. Earth is destined to become the center for a vast movement of light in this universe. We must be prepared for a glorious future. Now is the time to begin our great trip into a most incredible future. That's just my thing there at the end. I like to tell people. I edit that. And I'm going to do the summary. This is why I said I'm trying to get this through this as fast. I want to get a break. You guys deserve it. So, 3 summary points. 1, life must be seen in a new light that allows for its diversity to be accepted by each of us. We must understand that life is more than what we know as an animal or a plant. It's a rock, it's air, etc., because it has to do with the boundary layers of our planet and the other life form I've been trying to tell you about. Full consciousness is a reality quite different from what we now face daily in our existence on this planet, because we'll be integrating at higher levels. We have a great responsibility to perform, and to accomplish it will transform this galaxy and the sixth creation forever. That's our special role. So, let me put in my commercial, and I'll give another number also. And just for more information, you can write to that address, or you can call me at that number, or if you want to, you can call Dr. Rob at his number for orders, etc., which is 510-649-1872. And now I'm going to have Rob do some break announcements, and then we can have our break.
Read your commercial.
What?
We're not paid. Your average not paid.
Okay, my address is my name, Sheldon Idle, P.O. Box 811, Half Moon Bay, California 94019, and you can write to that address, or if you want to, you can phone me at 415-726-2827, or Dr. Rob for information all the time at 510-649-1872. Okay? And now it's time for Rob.
Just real quickly, I was going to mention to you that at the break, Sloopy Brews over here, and Sloopy's got all kinds of wonderful tapes. If you haven't gotten some of them, and it explains what the various symbols mean. And thank you, Henri. And so anyway, that is available for $1.
Now let's see here. I guess this is the 1/10 of an inch away. So okay. So anyway, I think it works. So what? Ah, yes, much better. So now let's start with our question period here. I'm going to not make it a real long one because I have a double interest in this, wanting to get this through quickly because one, I know everybody wants to go home, and two, I want to go home because I got to get out of here, got to get a flight in the morning. So I got to get up at around 6:30 in the morning, so I want to get as much sleep as I can. So, yes.
What's got date on Mexico?
Okay. Okay, Mexico is just in preparation, and when it happens, it will happen. That's why I've been trying to explain to people. Everybody put energy into the 5th, and the energy was there, but the timeline changed, so you didn't know whether it was going to happen, because I have certain ideas about it based on certain things I'm not allowed to talk to anybody about. So it'll probably be sometime maybe later in the summer. Then again, they may do it earlier in the summer just because I've said that now. They totally will do it, but they won't do it because I say so or I don't say so. You have to realize that. They are in charge. That's the first thing you have to realize. The second thing is you have to get it off your head that there's any set date for this other than the series of parameter dates for it that they've picked and won't tell anybody about. They've told 2 different people about parameters that I've had people talk to me about. You have to understand that the whole process here is very simple. They want us to have the contact when it's right for us to have the contact, when they've decided it's right for us to have the contact. It's kind of like these 3, and all they said is a parameter, and now they'll do it. And I think a lot of it will depend on how and when and where. I mean, they could do this in a kind of funny way. They might land right next to the American border, one of those big cities like Laredo. They might go way down to some place like Chichen Itza. They might go down. I mean, that's what I was doing when I was going through this. I picked about 50 different sites right off the bat. So I said to myself, it's going to be anywhere. So they'll do whatever they want to do, and we can make giant assumptions or little minute assumptions. It doesn't matter. But right now, the amount of sightings have increased, but the landing hasn't happened yet that they want. Yes?
Sheldon, is it possible that timeline got put off a little bit because of the information that I got to you about my friend in the meeting of people that I told you about?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons, yeah.
Is it appropriate to share with the group?
Nope, not yet.
Okay. But it is good. Tell everybody.
Yeah, it's very good, yes. Now that we've had our wonderful conversation that everybody's wondering about, now, next question. Next.
What about, in terms of the timeline, is that going to be altered with the Bhutan bill?
Everything is still on the same thing because the planet is still on the same timeline. So the timeline that you're asking about is still the same. The only giant problem is, for us, is because of all the different factors that dealing with changing consciousness and what's about to happen on this planet, the date they pick is dependent, therefore, on them picking all these things together, talking to the angelics, because the angelics have the final word on this, and then they'll do it. But that date, other than the parameter, I can't tell you. All I can tell you is that based on what they told me, the very latest would probably be December 2nd, 1996, because they said it's going to be at least 30 days before. So, anyway. Yes?
In all the explanations that you were doing about consciousness and everything, I mean, what part, prayer, meditation, things that we do, to raise our own awareness and stuff, what effect that has on us, increasing our consciousness?
Okay, raising awareness, etc., about our consciousness. As I just said, we have this field around us. What we do is when we meditate, we are integrating our field. So when you meditate, you're doing this process of integrating, and you're clearing your energies if you do a chakra cleaning or something like that, or like the anchoring exercise I gave in the workshops. So if you do those kind of things with it, what you're doing is you're integrating and learning to get out of the way. And as you do this process, that's why in the part that I did, which is the visualization, it talks about don't focus. So by not focusing, you're learning how to get out of the way. So this is part of a process of understanding how to do that whole process of increasing consciousness. So yeah, it does help.
And how
Yes?
much goes in if we don't seem to understand, like we read a book or your book or we listen to you or whatever we listen to or read, how much goes in that we feel that, we feel a certain level, we understand, or is it more goes in than we know or that we're aware of?
Right. What happens when you read anything, what you become aware of is at a certain mental level. You'll have it. But what happens is when you read it and take it in, your other levels help also. All right, I found the level. I found my level. You have a level then that helps you to get things on other concepts of consciousness than the mental one that we normally act in. One of our difficulties in being limited is that our limited consciousness cannot accept the concept of integration of our fields, because that then gets rid of its reality and therefore it fights. You might look at it, it's kind of like the cavalry or the fort at the end of the frontier, fighting for the last, what it says is the last stitch of land in that part of the boundary area. So it sticks totally to the last man type of defense system. And that's our big problem. So that's why we're constantly getting in the way. That's why I wanted to emphasize that, because our consciousness will do that, our mental consciousness, because it doesn't want to give up the ship. It doesn't matter to it whether the ship is sinking or not. It's still trying to find a way to repair the whole. It refuses to give up.
Might add to this, if I might, in meditation that I've experienced myself, what you're talking about, integrating the light body, and that consciousness, I believe when you read something, it's like on a mental level, and then on another level, you receive the information, and then it's somehow brought into your body through the light body.
Right. What happens is, okay, you have the connection to source. Around you is a field that goes from source down to your physical reality. This is your soul connection. When you're fully connected, it operates at all levels. It's integrated fully. It goes up and down like a self-regulated elevator. You can move to different levels of reality. You can move continuously at the same time to different levels of reality. You can exist in different levels of reality at the same time.
And that's in your mind, Sheldon?
That's not so much in your mind as in your upper consciousness. It's the closest that we can think of it as, which is why a lot of metaphysical people in the early part of the century, they call it the higher mind, which really it isn't, but it's the best way of looking at it if you're trying to visualize it, because it really doesn't act like a mind per se. It's pure consciousness.
Like a super consciousness.
Right, it's like a super consciousness. So the only way that we can understand it and regulate the energies from it is by looking at it as a mental or emotional aspect. But it's really more than that. Yes?
Sheldon, over the last week or two, many people have been getting like an electrical shock in the body.
Mm-hmm.
And can you explain maybe more what this is?
It's the fields. Remember when I was explaining about how the magnetics of the body, which is the subtle fields, the auric fields, etc., when they're integrating, they work their way into the electrical field. So what's happening is you integrate a part of your body, and this will happen to different people in different ways, depending on what's in right relationship to what's happening to them, and bang, they'll feel an electrical nervic energy, because the nerves are activated, because the magnetics control the electrical fields, and if you open up a part of an electrical field, the electrical is going to expand. It's just like with a field. If you have a resistance, it'll create a certain energy potential in that circuit. You get rid of it, it changes the energy potential. So the result is, when you clear your electrical field, you're clearing your magnetic and vice versa. So when the magnetic field clears, it'll cause a charge to the electrical, because the electrical now can produce more energy through it because those resistors are gone.
The body, a lot of them have really felt better after this.
Right, that's the reason why.
I mean, the circulatory system, is that something like the meridians too? I mean,
Well, that's just the meridians. The nervous system basically operates, oh, I missed my part here. The nervous system, there it is. The nervous system basically operates on 2 points. The traditional concept of the 2 types of nervous system, and also in the meridians, which actually feed into it, and are actually the control points for it. Because that's the meridians are the control points where the magnetics interact with the electricals that we're talking about here.
some people have been really hooked up for 2 or 3 hours like this at night.
Right, because what's clearing. It's clearing. It's just like if you're in a car and you're charging your battery. That's basically what it's like. Yes?
I'd like to ask a question about, on August 15th, when the grid system goes into effect, will we be immediately aware of it, or does it just give us more potential, or what?
What's going to happen is the gravity field of the planet will go through some craziness in the few days around it. That's going to cause us to feel some kind of craziness around us. So the way we get it expressed is going to depend on each person. Some people are going to feel it as an even intense electrical shock. Some people are going to get dizzy from it. Some people are not going to feel anything but a greater amount of energy. So it's going to depend on where that person is at when it happens. Everybody will have their own unique. They may have a strange thing where they go through a whole shock therapy and they're down for half the day, and the other day, half, they'll feel like they're the most energized person on the planet. They can't get to sleep. It'll depend on, or other person may sleep like Rip Van Winkle for the whole day.
It's changing the energy
Right.
of the earth then?
Right. It's going to start changing the field of the earth. That's going to affect the whole process. Yes? Yes, Gary? Yeah.
People in this crowd that are integrating their energy well and raising their consciousness, can you suggest some ways that they can direct that in their life?
The best way to affect it is to simply ask your angels to help you integrate your energies, because that's what they want you to do anyways, and you're finally giving them permission to do what they're doing at a much greater level. And then ask them to communicate with you when you meditate on what's going on, so that you get some kind of a voice or you get some kind of a colors, whatever, that will help you understand at a different level what's happening. And so this is basically, you have to ask. Ask for it to happen, and then allow it to happen, and ask as it's happening what is going on. And they will do in their own unique way with you of communicating. Some people hear a voice. Some people just get colors or sensations. It depends on the person. But that will help you to understand, and then as you do this, you'll get a better idea of how to do this. It's just like the first time you drove a car, you had a difficult time doing it. By the 3rd or 4th or 5th or 6th time, you were getting much better at it. And that's, you just do this and let this process begin, and as you get more and more used to it, it gets a lot easier for you to do this. And that's basically, as I was instructed, how to get it done. Yes?
I have 2 questions. You mentioned about when you were over England, the energy was strong. Did you experience any, like, seeing any new crop circles? Or?
No, I unfortunately was, as I tried to explain, I was stuck in lectures, traveling, and workshops. So, as a result, except for one afternoon when I was at a farmhouse with no transportation, so I couldn't go anywhere, and another time when I had about an hour one day, I didn't really have a chance to really be by myself. So I really didn't get a chance to go out in fields or anywhere like that. That's the next thing I've demanded when I go back there. If I go back there when I do, that I'm going to have a couple of days off where I can see things. Because it's not nice to say, well, I was there. I just saw things real quickly, and I didn't get a chance to feel it, because everybody was telling me how wonderful it is to sit in Glastonbury in the old abbey there, in the area where various of the original people that made the church, like Joseph Arimathea, were supposed to have done long ceremonies, etc. And it's really incredible energy. Well, I didn't get to even do that one, so I want to be able to do that next time. Yes?
Is there any reason that angels or angelic beings would be trying to make more contact now and asking us to help partner with them to do work?
Well, that's basically asking about angels and et cetera on working with us. That's what they want to do, because that's the key point. That's what this whole lecture was about. That's what all my other lectures have been about. We are now in a process of contact. The angelics want to contact us just as much as the space brothers and sisters want to do it. Their game is a little bit different because it's a spiritual one. So they can't show up in a spaceship, so to speak. They have to show up in the equivalent of a spiritual spaceship. It's a lot harder for us to see because we don't see spiritual energy unless you're a psychic that's really well integrated so you can really see these fields. It's very rare. So that's maybe less than maybe 1% of the population, even the people that are into New Age stuff can really do that stuff. Maybe you can do a part of it. So they're trying very desperately, and for them it's very hard because we have this limited aspect, which is that you can't integrate spiritual with physical as easily as they can. So the result is that we have to get it on the physical level, and so they have to get through this giant tyrant called our conscious mind and get us to understand it. So to them it's almost like if you're a little kid and they said, well, how do you talk to this guy? Well, you've got to climb this 5-foot wall that's 10 foot long, and then you've got to climb over that, and you've got to go over another 20-foot high wall, and then we're only going to give you a rope that goes up 5 feet, so you've got to make it over the top. So this is the problem. So what they do is, to me, amazing.
Does the word angelics include more than angels?
Right. It's presences, it's divas, it's a whole set. There's the elementals all the way up to Michael, as I like to call it. It's a huge, incredible group, and if you tried to get the names of all of them, you could start a whole library all by yourself. Yes?
Will there be any signs or warnings to prepare us for the Malazan and program?
Yeah, because will there be any signs? Well, the big sign you're going to get is the landings. That's going to be hard to miss.
Will everybody know about it?
Since the whole process is to work through our whole mental as well as physical, I would say, yeah, everybody's going to get it. The favorite one I like to tell, which I've said a zillion times, is this guy who's sleeping in bed and he's sound asleep and this thing's happening around midnight, and all of a sudden he hears this incredible music, and then he hears this voice, and then he hears the sound of what he thinks their ship's coming down and everybody making a big thing about it, and he wakes up and he says, that was some dream. And he looks out the window and it's real.
Washington's going to come to Eddie Street.
Yes?
Oh, you're going to love this one. A little more 3D. What's going on with the IRS and the government and
Well, you ask the hard ones, don't you? I can't really say much about it other than to say that it's in process and it's going to take a little bit longer because there's a lot of things going on which I can't really talk about right now. So I hate doing this, but just know that it's happening.
Is it really all that important anyhow?
No, it's not really all that important because of what's going to happen after that, but people want to know now. You've got to live in the now.
when?
When you say the governments, are you including local governments like county and
Everything.
everything?
So,
I got
yeah.
a physics question.
A physics question. What?
Last lecture you talked about when the polarities of light, and I'm assuming that is the full spectrum of creation light, when the polarities were crossed, that produced magnetism.
Right.
Would you articulate or describe or paint pictures of what the polarities of light are?
Okay, polarities of light.
And then I've got some other questions after that.
Okay, polarities have to do with light direction. Okay? Now, if you can concentrate direction of light, now I'm going to get into a theory of light that's a little bit different than what physics talks about. But if I get it, I'm not going to do the whole thing, or since I only have 10 minutes to myself here, this would be the last question. So what I'm going to do...
Are we going to ask about Shasta?
Okay, I'll do Shasta, because if I get into it, I know a lot of people aren't into science, and what I'd have to do is talk about magnetics and vortexes spinning, and I don't think you'd be that interested.
I can talk to you later about it. Not
Sure, I'll do that later, because it has to do with the nature. The way you determine a field spinning has to be with the nature of how light curves in a dimension. Okay?
We'll talk about it later.
Yeah, because I have to talk to you then about the characteristics of light in different dimensions. And that gets very complicated, because when you get into the higher dimensions, you have like 12, 15, or 20 or so different characteristics. Yes?
The next book, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What about Shasta? Everybody wants to know about Shasta.
Okay, Shasta. I didn't even hear about this until this morning, because I've been in Europe, and I totally was into all things in Europe, and basically they've gotten over the landing stuff, and they're in a different light. What's going to happen basically is they're just going to allow energies to happen in Shasta that will allow people, if they're at certain dimensional levels, to have an experience, and that's what that's all about.
What date?
No date. You got it. It will happen in the near future. Why can't you make comments about what the government... Why can't I make comments about the government? The reason why I can't do that is that right now, and I discovered this talking to some people in Europe, first of all, the governments are very paranoid about things. Second of all, things that are happening right now are very delicate, and I don't want to get in the way of them. And third of all, I have a responsibility with some people to talk to them about what's going on, and I have to keep that cut, so I can't talk about it. That's why. Optimistic about it. Yes, very.
What was the question to which you said yes?
Yes, about to be optimistic about what's going on with the governments right now. There's a big shift going on at the middle to upper middle echelon in the governments right now. That's all I can say about it. Yeah. Right, and clockwise up. No, what I was told was that each chakra has its own frequency of spin, and basically everyone spins the right way. And so what is happening right now is your spin in the old limited consciousness was to the right.
Clockwise or counterclockwise?
Clockwise. To the right. To the right. To the right.
Depends where you are on the equator, the chakra turns in a different direction.
Well, the old giant grandfather act was the Corellis effect game, where people were told in science that because of the Corellis effect, if you watched a shower or any other giant body of water, like a tub, go down, it would spin in one direction, namely clockwise to the northern hemisphere and counterclockwise in the southern hemisphere. And scientists who study vortices have discovered that vortices spin basically in the same direction in either hemisphere. So that's now considered to be a giant wives' tale among scientists, because that was one of the big ones that was in every science book you read for ages. But that one, same thing happens to people, northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere. You spin in the same direction. What we're having done right now is we are changing our spin from mainly to the right to a spin to the left, because full conscious beings tend to do a counterclockwise spin. That's why even the Earth spins that way. So as we understand that, more and more we'll be able to adjust for it.
Which way do the Merkaba spin now? Are they changing too?
Well, they naturally do the left spin, but the whole problem is that we have to understand is that we are slowly switching to integrate that physical and spiritual energies. And that's going to take us just recognizing it and let that process go through, and some will be getting the changes happening in their own different levels. Some are already in the process. Yeah?
Would it be a good exercise to spin to the left?
Well, I do that, but I don't recommend that for everybody, because some people, depending on their level of consciousness, could be in a level where they're changing their spin and they haven't been integrated yet. So the best thing to do is, if you're going to do something, do a little bit to the right, and then maybe do a little bit to the left, or else do the left and then do the right. It doesn't matter as long as you do both. But so I do the left first to open and to the right first, then second to seal, and you can do that. But I don't want everybody suddenly playing top here and right now, okay? Okay, I will give one or two more questions depending on their length. So, yeah, yes?
Anything else to say on David Hudson's work?
On what?
David Hudson's work?
David is going to be giving a major conference on the 8th and 9th of July in Los Angeles.
Where?
In Los Angeles at the Pasadena Center on the 8th and the 9th.
David, last name is?
Hudson. Just like the car, just like the guy who Hudson Bay is named after. I like that part. David is a cotton farmer from Scottsdale, Arizona. And roughly about 10 years ago, he started doing, actually when I first ran into him, it was about 12 years ago, he started doing research on trying to develop some way to find a superconductor. And he had originally, I ran into David in '84 when he was still working on a superconductor and was attempting to try to find some commercial way of getting it out, which didn't happen. And so from there, he developed about, I think it was about 5-6 years ago, I forget the exact chronologies, he started to develop a system which was starting to understand the nature of what life is about and how the physical and spiritual relate to one another, and how you can use certain specially processed chemicals, namely white gelatinous gold, to recreate the whole process of purifying, clearing, and basically creating your light body like that in 40 days. But the process, unfortunately, for those who do not know what's happening, this is why the landings are happening. What happened to some of the people that had lower amounts than the prescribed in the Egyptian Horus rites caused tremendous problems with people. They would disappear and they would levitate, and they weren't prepared for it. And it kind of freaked them out. And these were people who had been meditators for 10, 20 years. So the process, so he's now very worried about, one, the FDA seizing materials, and two, the whole process of maintaining a way of getting it out in a proper way so that it does get distributed and it does get to do the effect that it was supposed to do. So he's going to be doing a whole series of explanations and talks about what's happening with his project on the 8th and 9th of July at the Pasadena Center. And that's when I'm going to, because I've been following it for almost a year now. The original introduction I had to it was last August, as a matter of fact, and I remembered, oh, that's that guy that I dealt with in '84 on the superconductor, and I said to myself, yeah, that's the same guy, because when I saw him and heard the speech, he mainly talked about the energy processes, which I've also dealt with. Because I had something that was almost as incredible as what he had as far as superconductors goes. It's a thing called Ursha. And that also was discovered in the 50s. And it basically was able to reintegrate electrical and magnetic fields to the point that it could do amazing things. And it does basically the same thing like a unipolar magnet and other things that aren't supposed to happen in the universe. So science as it now exists on this planet at the present time is a very limited version of what science can be when it integrates the spiritual aspect, which people like David and the scientists working around him will help do. And that will lead to a lot of other things, like, for instance, the great task that Dr. Merkel is doing on his life crystals. You take all these different points, and they're talking to one another right now, which makes me very happy the last few months. When we begin doing all this, we can say, well, the chemicals exist for ascension. All we have to realize is that it's there, but there's a reason why we're not all being allowed to use it right now. It's not just the government, it's our consciousness. And so we have to understand that. We have to understand we have to do a preparation for it. And the first preparation we have to do is understand the nature of this galactic society that we're being put together to, because once we switch, we have to create two levels. Okay, okay. So once we switch, we have to create two levels. And the first level we have to create is we have to integrate our physical reality. The second level we have to do is our spiritual reality. Now, we all get F's in spiritual reality around here. We don't when we go to sleep and we float out around the universe, but in our conscious levels, we don't understand the spiritual. And what we're about to get with this whole process here is understanding it. And what I was giving you is just some of the basic energies that science studying these different things has discovered. There's also signals, the ancient, like for instance, Dr. Merkel is talking on how to use the ancient symbols that we found in Sumerian writing to understand how the mitochondria work, which can help you develop your energy system to the point where you can make cellular structure immortal. Now, this is just part of the whole process. There are incredible things going on out there. Yes, and I'll make this the last question, and I have to go.
Elaborate a little bit more about white gelatinous gold.
Oh, the white gelatinous gold?
And also, does it have anything to do with a monopole?
No, it's not a monopole. What it is really the philosopher's gold. That's basically what it is. It's the key to life. It's an amazing thing. He discovered it almost by accident. He was smart enough to see something happen and go for it, and had lots of money to do it with, but unfortunately he had everything once he started getting it to try to stop him. The bankers didn't like loaning him money when they realized he was doing some research on it, not growing cotton, etc. So the important thing about this gold is to remember this is the manna from heaven, the substance that was used in the rite of Horus, the 40 days toward immortality and ascension, etc. It's there. It's been discovered. Dr. Merkel has discovered something that's the same version of it based on the Sumerian tables about how RNA DNA get together and controls how the mitochondria, which is the basic energy, it's like the battery in the cell basically. How that connects to our RNA DNA, how we can create a cellular structure that's immortal. Once we create an immortal cellular structure, we integrate physical like that. Once you've integrated physical, you immediately, because you've grounded yourself into earth, up you go. It's like you have the most powerful trampoline and you've just decided to jump on it from a story up you go. And that's what happens. We have to learn you go down to go up. That's the key thing. Now, once you create the immortal body, you create the immortal energy of the ascension. The rest just happens. So what everybody's doing in purifying the body, going through special rites, etc., these are remnants of those old energy patterns. And then comes the philosopher chemicals, as I like to call them, that help you through the process. But you have to be prepared. That's why the landings are happening. We can get our consciousness up to a certain level. We have to help each other. We have to get our networks together. We have to do these things. And I want to put half in bold, real high letters. We have to do this. When we do that, then all the other barriers around us will go down, and we'll be ready to do it. The ascension process is about us getting together. It's not about us sitting in a room and meditating for 5 years. In fact, we don't have the 5 years to do it in anyways. What we have to learn is we have to network with one another. We have to support one another, just like for instance, at the beginning we were talking about how energy can heal, and Colleen explained about her son. This is what we're talking about. We put that all together, that's what I've been trying to explain, we are an unstoppable force. We are so powerful it makes anything on this planet that tries to create this want in us or this less than in us go away. Governments realize that. They're now starting to get it about the landings. They're now starting to get into panic about it. They're now starting to run all around the planet trying to figure out what's going on. How can we aid it? How can we do this? How can we do that? You have to understand this is only happening because people are sitting in these rooms and they're going out and they're doing something. It doesn't mean you have to go out and try to create the Rockefeller Foundation. What you have to do is just make networks. Just work with one another. Coordinate. That's what we're doing. Like, this will be my final word before my prayer. My quick final speech because I have to go. we have to understand the importance of this. Like, for instance, what's happening is that we've gotten it together, so Dr. Rob will be helping to put up a thing we're going to call VictoryNet. It's going to be launched on the 26th of July, so you'll probably get a lot of information or packet on how to connect. The process right now is to connect with one another and to understand our spiritual nature by this connection. We are spiritual beings in a physical body that's made out of light. Our bodies mostly are nothingness. If you were to look at a cell and analyze the amount of emptiness in the cell versus the amount of non-emptiness, or what we call non-emptiness, we would find out that the emptiness outnumbers the non-emptiness by 9 to 1. So you may not see it as being a giant, incredible piece of cheddar cheese, but that's what you are. You got Swiss cheese, cheddar cheese, you got little holes in yourself. You're mostly made up of space. So you have to understand that. It's hard to think of, because when you do this, you say, that's not space, but it is. Or you go bounce up against the wall and you say, that hurts. That can't be made out of holes. But it is. So that's what physics is also trying to have people understand. But anyway, enough of my diatribes, because I haven't got time for a long one right now. Besides, it's getting late. So I'm going to thank everybody for coming, and I'm going to do a little quick prayer, and then we'll be able to go. So I would like to thank and ask the great Supreme Creative Force to continue to bring those wonderful energies that has been brought down through the angelics to us, and to ask that this love and this light be used to further help integrate ourselves, to help us maintain the support and care for each other, that great love energy that makes this whole thing possible, and ask that all the information that's been brought into here today is explained and expanded on in levels that allows all of us to understand it and use it, and helps us in our own unique way to allow for this new galactic civilization to happen. And I especially ask all the angelics and all the great energies around us now to allow us to all return home safely tonight and do those parts that are part of our right relationship in creating this great divine plan of divine intervention for this new and wonderful galactic civilization that we're all about to have around us. And I say amen, and I say God bless to all of you for coming, and all my thanks go to you, and we have a great task to perform, and I know we can all do it, and thank you again. The what? Oh, yes, and before, as you go, can you help with the chairs getting back so we can get out of here fast? Thank you.